So this is a story of grit.
Perseverance, for sure.
Welcome back to The Book Isn't Necessarily Better, a library podcast from the Community Library Network. Very excited to talk about The Martian today. I'm your host, Michaela.
And I am Roxanne. And we have a very special guest today. Her name is Sophie Milam. And she did something very exciting. I'll give you a little bit of a background on Sophie. Besides being my good friend, she is a native of San Antonio and Evansville, Illinois. But now she lives in Smelterville, Idaho, which is right next door to Delterville. She loves that joke. She's so happy when she's really happy when I do that. She has a BA in physics and a BS in astronomy from the University of Hawaii at Hilo, and a Master's of Engineering at the University of Idaho at Moscow. Now, why am I telling you all of this? Well, because Sophie did something very exciting for about 8 months in the year 2014.
Yep, 2014 to 2015.
Well, I'll let Sophie take it from here. Sophie, what did you do for 8 months in 2014?
So I signed up for a self-imposed isolation and confinement mission that lasted exactly 242 days, which is 8 months. And the purpose of this mission was to pretend that we were on Mars. We were looking at crew cohesion, so how do you build a good crew? And then how do you let that crew thrive under really extreme circumstances?
Nice. So how did you get picked for this? And was this funded by NASA?
Yes, so indirectly. The University of Hawaii at Manoa, which is on the island of Oahu, they had a research grant from NASA to study crew cohesion, specifically how to pick a crew. And so I basically did an online application. You had to tell them kind of why you were interested, and then also provide a research topic that you wanted to look into while you were in the dome.
Wow, what was yours?
Mine was, so I had two, actually. I was actually still finishing my master's degree, so half of mine was finishing my master's degree, which was, let's see, what's a good way of describing it? Machine learning for robotic gaits in non-traditional robotic bodies.
Wow,
I'm
so
sorry.
That is very the reason we're laughing is literally an hour ago we were recording our Jurassic Park episode and we were discussing about the failure
Of supposedly fail-safe systems.
Oh, yes.
They really could have used a Sophie on their team at Jurassic Park.
I would have loved to be on the Jurassic Park team. I would definitely make dinosaurs if I could.
Things probably would have ended up differently as well.
Yeah, I mean, I hope so. I hope I would have been a little bit more forward-thinking in my dinosaur recreation park.
The gates design as well.
Come on, man.
So did you get to work on your master's while you were in the dome?
I did. I am actually the first person to graduate on sMars.
Wow. So what is sMars?
So sMars was our shorthand for simulated Mars.
I would have called it SMARS.
I know. We called ourselves Smartians, though. So
That's
I don't know why we did that and not
SMARS.
Maybe because it reminded us of s'mores. Man,
Couldn't have those?
Yeah, we did not have the makings for s'mores, so that's just a constant reminder.
Also,
nobody
open
wants.
flame, no?
Less of an issue than it is on real Mars.
Our Mars.
Our Mars.
Yeah, it's real Mars.
We could also call it the analog, but sMars was kind of the thing that stuck. We called ourselves Smartians, but more often than that, it was astronaut, like N-O-T instead of N-A-U-T.
I like that.
Yeah, we all really enjoy a good wordplay.
That's fun.
In the dome.
I don't usually like a pun, but I don't know if you would call that a pun, would you?
Yes.
Yeah.
I don't usually like a pun, but that's a good
the literal
one.
definition of a pun.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
English major. Yes.
So, tell us more. So, who were you with? What was the dome like? Where was it?
So the dome was about 9,600 feet above sea level on the side of the Mauna Loa volcano. So this means when you looked out of our window, and we technically had two, but we donated one to the garden. So we had one window that we could look out of, and it was about 1.5 feet in diameter. It was a circular, like a porthole that you would have on like a ship. When you looked out of this window, there was nothing but old lava flows and new lava flows. And so that's the difference between the big island of Hawaii where we were and like Oahu, or the other really pretty islands that are all really green and lush and beautiful. This one is younger, and so it's still just the lava.
Wow.
So it was very Mars-like. We were in a 30-meter dome. So meter is approximately 3 feet, so about a 90-foot in diameter dome. We had an upper loft where everyone had their own quarters.
Like a little dorm room?
Yeah, a dorm room would have been like luxurious. Think of like a pretty good walk-in closet. That was what I lived in.
So enough room for like a bed, anything else?
So, like, not a real twin bed. We called them single beds. And, like, if you were to cut a queen mattress in half lengthwise, that's what you had. So, I think they were about 65 square feet. And they were sloped, right? Because it was the upper loft. So your ceiling was sloped. And so you could either put your bed along one of the radius walls, or you could put it along the edge where it was really sloped down. So if you woke up in a panic, you would absolutely smack your forehead on the ceiling.
Did that ever happen?
Yes, multiple times.
Oh, no.
There were a couple rough nights, but it was more comfortable because we also had a small desk in there. And so I liked just having a little bit more room to do something other than either lay down or sit. Like, I could do stretches in my room.
And can I ask, how old were you when you did this?
26.
And was everyone the same age, and how many other people were with you?
So I was the youngest. We had 2 other people under 30, and then we had 3 people over 30, but below 45.
And what's the typical age of like an astronaut?
That is a little bit of a tricky question. So people will train for missions that end up getting scrubbed for like 3 years.
Wow.
And so you'll spend 3 years training for a mission only to find out that like maybe that mission is no longer useful, so they scrub that mission entirely, and then you start over and you start training for a new mission.
So they can't just transfer you at the drop of a...
It's very hard
at the drop
to
of a space
transfer.
helmet.
Yeah. But I think the median age is right around like 30.
Okay.
So a couple that are younger. But I mean, keep in mind that the qualifications for being an astronaut are, they're quite advanced. So definitely bachelor's degree, master's degree, and a lot of experience. Master's degree and military service have often gone hand in hand.
Okay.
Mostly doctorates, though.
And doctorates in what specifically?
All kinds of sciences, really. So you want your engineers, botanists, which our main character is a botanist. Really, it's everything, and it's very mission dependent. So, like, if you're on a mission that needs, a mechanical engineer and a botanist and maybe an astrophysicist, but that same mission, wouldn't need maybe a military commander, or maybe it wouldn't need a, electrical engineer.
Okay.
But that being said, astronauts are incredibly cross-trained. Like, they know it all. And The Martian does a really good job of kind of illustrating that. Our main character is a mechanical engineer. He often has to hotwire all of his electrical systems.
Basically MacGyver.
Yeah, MacGyver in space, totally. With a lot more poop.
Well, that is a wonderful transition, and I'll definitely be asking you more questions about your mission. But let's get a quick synopsis, if you wouldn't mind, of The Martian by Andy Weir.
Yes, I'm so excited for this, you guys. Okay, so I think that the book opens brilliantly, essentially with Mark Watney being like, oh my god, I'm dead. I have a hole in me. I'm on Mars. What am I going to do? What am I going to do? What am I going to do? My suit is like backfilling with oxygen, which will actually kill you. Too much oxygen, which is a very ironic way to die.
And I believe he says that in
He does. He's like, the irony is not lost on me. I will be the first to die of oxygen poisoning on a planet with no atmosphere. So his sense of humor is very dark the whole time, which is absolutely his coping mechanism. And they do a great job of talking about how personality kind of factors into how a crew is chosen. But the long and short of the book is our fearless hero wakes up impaled with a hole in his spacesuit on the surface of Mars, which is somewhere you never want to be with a hole in your spacesuit. And he has to make it back to his habitat called the Hab. And he basically has to fix himself, figure out like what all is wrong, because he just went through a massive sandstorm. which on Mars can be planet-wide. Like the entire planet can be engulfed in a storm all at the same time.
Oh, that's awesome. And the surface of Mars is...
So it is red. It's called the Red Planet. And they actually have another great line from this. Mars is so old that...
How old is it?
It is so old that literally the entire planet has rusted.
Oh.
And so that's why it's red. It's entirely covered in iron oxide, which is normal, everyday rust.
Oh, so I guess I had an idea that it was sandy?
It is sandy.
Or is it more like dusty?
Like rust flakes.
Yeah.
Yes and yes. So it's if you look at our lava fields, and there's a couple pictures on my blog that you probably saw of where I was...
When I was stalking you, yes. For the podcast.
I also did a little bit. It's fine.
But basically, lava comes out of the ground, and it is, red hot, and then it cools and it turns black.
The floor is literally lava.
The floor is literally lava.
That's great.
Okay.
And so over time on Earth, what'll happen is that that'll all weather down. This is all coming up from the core, the mantle of the Earth. And everything inside the Earth is essentially some form of iron. And it's essentially making the Earth into a magnet.
Now, I totally digressed. I'm super sorry. Let's get back to the plot. So he is on Mars, and I won't interrupt you anymore, baby.
That is okay. So he's on Mars. He's absolutely alone, which, first of all, there are no NASA backups for being alone on a planet with no way off. Part of what they say in the book is the very first thing that they send over is the MAV, Mars Ascent Vehicle, which is basically your way off of Mars. They send that over first. It lives on a little, think of like a little tripod. And what that tripod is outfitted to do is compress the Martian atmosphere and separate it into usable rocket fuel. So they send it up with a lot of hydrogen, and it essentially just needs to break off the oxygen portion from the regolith, which is just another name for soil that doesn't have any organics in it. And then it stores that oxygen, and when you combine hydrogen and oxygen, that is rocket fuel. And it's very explosive, and weirdly enough, it makes water. So they send that up first, and then they send all the supplies. So basically, when the astronauts get there, all they have to do is set up their tent, and then they're ready to go. So what's happened to poor Mark Watney is that his Mars Ascent Vehicle is gone because his crew saw him get impaled by an antenna. And then it actually went through his biomonitor, which is what connects all the crew together so they can see their life support. And so his crew essentially sees him get hit, impaled, flies off into a storm because, again, less gravity, so you're going to, if you get hit, you're going to fly farther too. So he gets blown away, essentially, and his last readout that comes from his computer is all flat lines. And so his team thinks that he's dead.
They have no reason to think that.
They have no reason to think that he survived, and they're heartbroken about it. It's a very difficult decision. The commander, Lewis, is a woman. She's a Marine, I believe, and eventually they end up taking off. They hook back up with their interplanetary spaceship, which is what goes between Earth and Mars, and basically just hangs out orbiting around Mars while they're on the surface. And then they start their trek home. Mark Watney wakes up hurt, has to go back, and then essentially has to figure out how to live on Mars until the next mission is slated to come, which is 4 years later. The book is all about how he solves problems one at a time, and then Mars knocks him down. And then he solves that problem, and then figures out something else to do, and some other workaround, and some other situation that he can be in that's better than the one before, and then Mars comes and knocks him back down. And it's a really awesome story about how a nerd can totally take any situation and then just start a problem and then just keep sort of incrementally making your situation better. And if you have setbacks, you throw a tiny hissy fit and then you get back at it and you keep going.
So this is a story of grit.
Perseverance, for sure, which shout out to Perseverance, which is the rover that's currently on Mars.
Oh, okay. Shout out to Perseverance.
And then so basically he has to make a rover journey that takes about 50 days. And is fraught with all kinds of other perils because now you're essentially in a minivan on Mars as opposed to a giant tent on Mars. And he has to make his way across all of this space that has never been explored on Mars. And then he has to get into the other crew's Mars Ascent Vehicle and take that up and rendezvous with his ship as it comes back around.
What's happening back on Earth while he's doing this?
back on Earth, they're dealing with some very very realistic NASA problems. So, they have all of this data saying that he's dead. NASA is very data-driven. And so they put out a statement saying that he's died. And this is the first person to die on another planet. This is a very big deal. And so NASA is having to deal with the fallout of that. NASA is a public domain organization. And what that means is that every single bit of data that they collect is the public's. It's not theirs. It belongs to each and every American.
Cool. Okay.
But
I own NASA.
Yeah.
Hey, girl boss.
But with that comes this terrible problem where if they take a picture of the site after the storm, there's a potential that they're going to have this image of Mark Watney's body just lying there. And that's going to be everywhere. That's going to be, anyone can get that picture, and it's just going to be like a horrible blow to NASA, who has terrible funding issues in real life and in the book. And something like that is, it's a way that all of the rest of the Mars missions get scrubbed.
It's a PR nightmare.
It's a PR nightmare. And so they make the decision not to look at it for a while. But then they do, and they figure out that, the rover has moved, and, these two things are now up that weren't up before. And they're like, oh my gosh, he's not dead. So this is even worse than leaving your crewmate behind after they died on another planet. They're like, what do you tell astronauts? And astronauts are notoriously noble and self-sacrificing and all of that stuff, which is normally great, except when they accidentally leave their best friend behind on another planet with absolutely no way to survive on their own.
Yikes.
And they come up with this brilliant plan to not only have the Hermes, which is the spaceship that goes from Mars to Earth, they have it actually slingshot back around Earth, back to Mars without slowing down. So they're going to be the crew with the longest space travel history in the world, in the universe, I suppose.
And Mark Watney has a very creative way he proposes meeting up with them.
Yes, he does. He suggests that if they can't get to him, then he will vent the atmosphere that is created in his suit through a hole that he plans on stabbing through his glove and then flying around like Iron Man.
I don't know why that wouldn't work. Now, I'm not a scientist, but it seems fine to me.
Yeah, I've seen Iron Man. That seems legit.
Mm-hmm. Yep, physically totally possible. Your suit is pressurized. There's less pressure around you. It will create a jet, and you will flop around like a fish. Like a fish in space.
Wow. They don't let him do that in the book, right?
They do not. They go with the fact that that is an absolutely terrible idea.
Killjoys.
I know.
But the movie...
They do let him do it.
And it's great.
He flops around like a fish.
He does.
You gotta admit.
So this book was written by Andy Weir.
Yeah.
Could you tell me a little bit about Andy?
So Andy was actually a software engineer. He is a self-proclaimed nerd and has been forever. I got the opportunity to talk with him while I was on Mars about The Martian, and it was like a geeky high point in my life. I feel like other girls met, the Backstreet Boys or Enrique Iglesias, and Sophie got Andy Weir's email address while being in a simulated Mars environment, and those are all on the same level.
So you got to interview him.
I did. I interviewed him. I interviewed him about The Martian, and it was really funny because he had just as many questions for me about what I was doing as I had questions for him about his book and how amazing it was. I mostly tried to not fangirl, but it was really, really hard. We talked about all kinds of things. He would not go to Mars, which I thought was one of the most interesting things. He said that he is not brave enough.
Would you go to Mars?
Absolutely, in a heartbeat.
Well,
Yeah.
Okay.
I think he said he's afraid of flying as well.
Yeah, he, software people are very risk adverse. And I think that plays in well for their career, but not well for their going to Mars desires.
He did a lot of actual science for this. Is it right on, or how close does he get?
He calculated actual trajectories for these make-believe ships and where we would have to be. So a lot of the great thing about the book is that a lot of it is they're talking about the Hohmann transfer, which is a window when Mars and Earth are at their closest in their orbits. And this is normally when people send stuff to Mars, even us, we do this now. And it's to cut back on time that something needs to spend in space, which is a harsh environment. And it also lets us get places a lot faster. But all of these sorts of transfers are how all of our probes have gotten anywhere. So any of the probes Viking and Voyager, they all make all of these slingshots around other planets, and they do this to gain momentum. And they essentially just like fling themselves through the universe on all these little gravity wells. So it's really cool that he did all of this science. And the greatest part about it was when we were talking, he sent all of these to me, like just as attachments. And at the time, we were having trouble with our own support crew being like, oh, just go to this link. And we didn't actually have internet. We had a very limited internet. Again, with simulating, you can't beam the whole of internet to Mars.
What?
That's way too much data and constantly being updated. And there's just no room for things like telemetry and how you're doing and like your own personal stuff. So you get a very watered down version of the internet. So we got to pick each of us got to pick 5 sites that we would like access to.
Okay, what were your sites?
Yep.
Mine were like not very cool because so they couldn't be anything where you could have real-time interaction because all of our interactions were spaced out by 20 minutes. It's 20 minutes one way and then 20 minutes back.
Including your interview?
Including my interview, which was done over like the course of a week.
Wow.
So in between waiting for replies, were you just like doing like an antsy dance?
Yes, definitely.
Like, come on.
Yeah.
How did you pass the time?
I was never once bored on Mars. There was so much to do all of the time. There were awesome things to do, like going out on EVAs, which is extravehicular activities, and that's basically when you dress up in a spacesuit and you go outside. So we had 6 spacesuits. 4 of them were basically rehabbed hazmat suits. Mm-hmm. So they were big and green and looked like anything that you've seen on like a zombie movie.
Okay.
And then we had 2 from the University of Massachusetts Space Sciences program, and I named them because I do that. I named them Phil and Shelley because you fill them and they are a shell. I'm not joking, these are the actual reasons.
That's amazing.
That's great.
Yep.
And they were much more robust. So any of the pictures that you've seen of me in the white suit that actually looks like an astronaut suit, those are the ones that were really the best analogs for what we were doing.
So the spacesuit that Matt Damon, who plays Mark Watney, wears in most of The Martian, that like
Orange-ish
Under
one.
Armour looking orange suit, is that realistically something you could wear on Mars?
Yes. So Mars is really cool. The temperature range for Mars is something like negative 100 degrees Fahrenheit to 90 degrees Fahrenheit. The reason for that is that there's no atmosphere. The atmosphere essentially acts like a blanket on the planet, and it helps keep heat in. It also provides pressure. So all that suit would need to be, as long as you were out in the daytime when it's warm, all that would need to be is it would need to be fairly rigid to maintain a pressure inside the suit, outside of your body, so that the pressure outside of your body but inside the suit was higher than the pressure inside your body, which is how it is here on Earth. So Mars pressure 0, essentially. It's got about 1/100th of an atmosphere. Earth has 1 atmosphere. So on Earth, the pressure outside is more than the pressure inside your body. So that's what holds you together. It's pushing you together.
Oh, okay.
Thank you,
You
Earth.
could see by the looks that Michaela and I are giving each other that we need a little bit more explanation.
Explain it
more
to me.
ation explanation.
Explain it to me like I'm a 3rd grader, please.
So the pressure inside your body has an internal pressure, and that's actually what pushes back against outside pressure and helps just reinforce your bones and everything like that. But it's less than the outside pressure, because if it was more than the outside pressure, you would explode.
Okay, is this why astronauts lose bone density?
This is part of it, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
So if you were on Mars without a suit, you would explode or implode, and this is a point in the book and the movie. Why don't you tell us about that point?
I was watching the movie like right after I read the book, and Matt Damon, this was like the first sequence where he's listing off all the ways that he's going to die, right? So he's looking right at the camera, and it's very like stoic. And so he says, I'll either, if the water reclaimer breaks, I'll die of thirst. If the oxygenator breaks, I will suffocate. If the hab breaches, which means that, he's all of a sudden in an unpressurized environment, he'll sort of implode. Oh, I cringed so hard because it's not implode. If you are in a submarine at the bottom of the ocean and that breaches, you will implode.
Okay, noted.
Like a person crushing a can. You will just get real tiny.
Okay.
And you won't like it. If you are in a place, so that's a place that has a lot of pressure underwater. if you're in a place with no pressure, all of that internal pressure in your body is suddenly more than outside, and you will literally explode.
I wonder why the movie got it so wrong.
It's a small thing. Like, nobody would know this.
It's something only Sophie noticed.
No.
But you would think in, like, such a technical movie.
And they had a lot of help from NASA on the movie.
Yeah.
So I think someone would have been like,
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that brings us to the movie. So when was the book written?
The book was written in 2011.
And then when was the movie made?
The movie was made in 2015.
So that means that when you were interviewing Andy Weir, the movie had not yet been released?
Correct.
Okay. And did he have any consultation with the movie? Did he write the screenplay?
He did not write the screenplay. He was consulted on the movie, but again, it's so different, just the subject matter and the way that things kind of go together. In the book, you're very much put in the role of a scientist trying to figure something out, and the stakes are very high. In the movie, there's not a lot of great ways to explain, like, essentially an inner monologue.
I also wouldn't want to watch his inner science monologue. I love reading it.
Yeah.
But I don't want to watch him just do the math for all of the things he has to do to survive.
And
Would
that's
you
a lot
enjoy
of
that?
what that's a lot of what the book is. It's him being like, okay, here's my problem. My rover needs to haul like 17 solar panels while I'm taking this journey. If I stack them in 2 columns of this, it'll be fine. If I stack them in 1 column, it'll still be fine, but I gotta haul this other thing, so I gotta be able to do both of these things. How do I make a sling? What is this resin I can use? How do I do that? Can I use the resin outside of the hab, or do I have to make everything inside and then take it out? So all of these are like very real things that need to happen, and I love the book for this, the reason that everything is so scientifically laid out. It's very entertaining to see his process. At one point, he's doing all of these calculations using all of these different values. So you get a unit that's just like absolutely crazy. And he's like, I hate writing this out. I'm going to call it Pirate Ninjas. So we've got 15 Pirate Ninjas to go, and I've only got the ability to make 3 Pirate Ninjas. So like I got to stop and make more Pirate Ninjas.
Is that the unit he uses?
He uses Pirate Ninjas.
That's funny.
He also at one point decides that he wants to be named Blondebeard, and that he is technically a Martian pirate. First space pirate ever.
Great.
Yep, fantastic.
In the book, or I guess a question I have is, in the movie, I don't think they make any mention of him having a family at all. Do they? Or do they talk about his parents? Or
They do briefly. NASA back on Earth was trying to rush a probe and launch it within this window so that it will actually crash land and give him food, because his main issue is that he doesn't have enough food to survive. And then they'll also give him a radio because his other main issue is that he can't communicate with Earth. And so they have this moment where the probe fails, and it fails spectacularly. The entire vehicle on launch just disintegrates into the sky, and it's because they skipped their testing procedure for the launch to try and hurry things up so that he would actually get the probe before he dies of starvation. But if they had done the testing, they would have realized that the payload that they have, which was essentially like food cubes, it can survive the vacuum of space, it can survive being crashed into a planet, being exposed to that atmosphere, and then being like scavenged off of the dirt and then eaten. Like, it's all good with that.
And I'm assuming this is full of the freeze-dried ice cream you can buy at science museums. Yes?
Oh yeah, I'm sure that was entirely what it was.
Yeah. But really, what would be the food that they're sending to him?
So they described it as like protein cubes. So think of before they make protein bars really yummy and like inject it with a bunch of chocolate and peanut butter and other flavorings and sugar and stuff. It is essentially protein paste.
Like a nougat?
Yeah, I mean, like tofu is similar, right? Like it's a squishy protein made out of plant matter.
Oh.
It's like that.
So it's just plain tofu before you cook it, and it turns into something good.
Yeah, exactly. So it's just think of hard protein cubes.
Exciting.
Very exciting.
Don't run out of ketchup.
Don't run out of ketchup.
Or Vicodin.
Yeah.
I love that they took that directly from the book.
Yeah.
So, do you want to explain that little sequence?
So Mark Watney's main issue is that he has all the vitamins he needs. NASA sends up like 8 years worth of vitamins. He's got all the protein he needs. Again, all the meals that they have are like very protein rich, so he can ration those easier. The issue is that he doesn't have enough calories, so he starts growing potatoes using night soil, which is a very lovely way of saying human poop. And then he eats potatoes, and potatoes have a very high caloric intake. And but he's eating them every single day for like a year and a half. And so there's this great shot in the movie. Matt Damon does this perfectly. It's also like directly out of the book, which is awesome. He crushes up a Vicodin and pours it into his little tray, food tray, and he dips his potato in it and says, I'm going to dip my potato in Vicodin because no one's here to tell me I can't. He takes a big bite and looks directly at the camera and says, it has been 7 days since I ran out of ketchup.
Oh. And that's directly from the book?
Directly from the book. And that's actually one of the things that astronauts really talk about when they're actually in space. Because there's not a lot of air circulation, the way that tastes and smells are, things don't taste as much and they don't smell as much. And so a lot of astronauts request like tons of hot sauce and like really, really flavorful things.
Like pungent fish sauce, I would imagine.
Yeah, and it just like, it doesn't smell anything up. You never have that pungent aroma lingering.
Wow. Okay, so now I'm going to go back to the dome. I think like the most fun questions to ask are the daily life. So like, what were you eating in the dome?
I would say our diet was 90% what you could actually take to Mars. So it was a lot of freeze-dried food, a lot of dehydrated
Freeze-dried ice cream?
We did have that. It got old very, very fast.
So that's not actually good, right?
It's not. The very worst thing was cheese. Freeze-dried cheese is incredibly difficult to rehydrate. I think that we spent, like, in true nerd fashion, we had so many tests of cheeses that we did, like how to rehydrate. Was it better to rehydrate with hot water or cold water? What if you added small amounts over time and let it sit and then, like, moved it around so that everything was rehydrating at a similar pace? We nerded it out so good.
How many people were with you?
There were 5 others. We were a gender-balanced crew, so there were 3 women, 3 men. And yeah, we had a range of skills. We had an ex-Army medic, so that was our primary care person. And then if we got really hurt, we had access to a doctor who would make the trek up, and that would break simulation, which was always at the forefront. Try not to break simulation. And then we also had an area that had been leveled out for us that was a landing zone for a helicopter if there was ever anything that was very emergent. And in that case, there was a military base nearby that we could call, and they would come get us.
Wow.
That never happened in my crew.
Oh, good.
We did have a doctor come up because one of my crew members jabbed himself in the thumb with a chisel and needed stitches. Yep.
I also can't watch the first scene of that movie, by the way, when he's trying to remove the antenna from himself.
Yeah.
I was like, I'm going to go make food, and I'll be back in 5 minutes. It's gross.
Yeah.
Can't imagine.
But I mean, think of the cross training. Like that guy legitimately knew how to like take care of himself, and then probably also anyone else who happened to have similar injuries. So
what sort of qualifications or personality traits would make somebody, like, for one, what kind of qualifications personality-wise meant you could be in your program, and then, versus real astronauts?
So we actually never found that out. We were crew 3 in a 6 crew kind of timeline at that point. And so there was no way that the researchers were going to give out the secret sauce before the end of the testing. So after us, there was another mission that went on for a year instead of 8 months. Before us, there were 2 missions that went on for 4 months each. So it was kind of progressively getting longer and longer, and then also dealing with, a different set of personalities.
And the whole point of it wasn't so much like testing how to live on Mars. It was personalities and like a psychology.
Yes. So the main mission was understanding crew cohesion under extremely isolated and confined environment. So isolation is bad. Humans don't normally do very well in isolation, which is why it's like a very bad punishment. Even in jail, the worst thing that can happen is that they put you in solitary.
Like we're wired to even want to be with people we don't like rather than be alone?
Yes. So Mark Watney, in the book during Watney Watch, which is one of the TV shows that they start having, Mark Watney's therapist goes on it, and she's describing his personality. And Mark Watney is this amazing guy who, really just like he lifts the mood. And part of what she was saying was that even when on Earth, when they were doing their testing and getting ready, even when they started pushing them really hard and they started less sleep, more stress, more things to solve, like more problems that are arising, he would, instead of getting like beat down, he would get more boisterous and he would crack more jokes and he would make people laugh even more than like he already was. And that's really important in any crew, to have that breakup. Someone who's able to take a situation that's really stressful and then do something that's normally just like a part of who they are, and it eases that tension. And so we had that a lot in the dome as well.
So was there sort of like a class clown in your dome?
There were a lot of people. Like it was great how each person's like specific nerdiness or their specific sense of humor, like every now and then stuff would be going wrong and someone would just say like the exact perfect, like this is the exact Martha moment, and it was just like everyone would crack up, and there was no reason for it. We actually tracked our humor. This is how nerdy we were. But Jocelyn, she tracked our humor and like jokes that came in, inside jokes among different like factions in the group.
That's fascinating.
And just like we would sit down and discuss once a week, like, is this joke still funny? Like, is this joke not? And like she literally was able to track the humor of the group over the.
Oh. And who was Martha?
Martha was our commander. So just like the crew in The Martian, our commander was also a woman, Martha Lenio, Dr. Martha Lenio. She's amazing. She's Canadian, photovoltaics engineer. She is still just one of the most competent people I've ever met. And everyone had a hand in kind of deciding who they wanted to be commander. We went on a 7-day backpacking trip, and everyone got a chance to lead the group for a day. Martha's day was fantastic. And at the end, we got to let our leaders know who it was that we would want to be commander. Every single person, Martha included, voted for Martha. And when she said this, she was like, I feel kind of bad, like, I totally voted for myself. And I'm like, I am so happy that you voted for yourself. I would want someone who would want the job. Mm-hmm. Like, I didn't want the job, but I really thought that you would be the best person. She's like, I did too, and that's why I wanted it.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Going back to the movie, so what are the big major differences between the book and the movie, besides the implode explode?
Other than that, they actually do a really good job keeping to the book. One of the things that I talked about with Andy Weir was how he decided kind of genders and races, religions, ethnicities of his characters, and his answer was really, I felt like it was really engineering. He's like, it's really easy to tell people apart when they have like something that sets them apart. So there were 2 women on the crew. The commander was one of the women, so there was the commander woman and then the other woman. There was a white guy, a German guy, and a Hispanic guy. So that was one of the things that I thought they did a really good job of in the movie, kind of maintaining that diversity and kind of reasoning for all of that. You always knew exactly who was who in the movie, who was who in the book, but I thought that they did a really good job all the way through. The only thing that they can't really translate into a movie is, again, all of that inner monologue. The way that the book is written, it's almost like diary entries. Everything that Mark does starts with like Sol 29, verbal log from inside the airlock. And so he's talking at a camera at all these places, which really translates well to the movie because that's what Mark Watney does. But then there are these other times where, and this is something that's skipped over in the movie quite a bit, is his actual journey from his hab to the other landing site for a future mission where he's going to pick up the other MAV. In the book, this is like a really, really hard time because essentially he has to drive for 4 hours and then sit in the sunshine with his solar panels out to recharge his battery, and like he's stuck in essentially a minivan. So it's a really rough thing. He goes from already being isolated and confined in the hab to now being isolated and really, really confined in this Martian minivan. And so he has to do that for about 50 days. That's one of the times where you get a lot of like introspection on his part, where he talks about how he describes the landscape and talks about how beautiful Mars is and how much he hates it and like how beautiful it is and how he hopes that everything that he's doing is going to help future Mars missions, which is a very astronaut thing to do.
Very noble.
It is noble, self-sacrificing, and like through all of it, how he's able to communicate with Earth. He goes and he digs up an old, real Mars mission, Mars Pathfinder, and he brings that back to his habitat, hacks it, is able to communicate with Mars using this like 1997 technology, and then he loses that. And it's like having a lifeline just yanked away from you right at like the hardest part of what you're trying to do. So.
And they don't really do that in the movie. I was kind of bummed.
Yeah.
He loses it in the book, and it's, like, devastating. I felt it. I'm like, oh my god, he can't talk to anybody. But in the movie, once he establishes contact with Earth, like, he's just in contact with them.
Yeah,
pretty much the whole time.
And it gets better.
Yeah.
Over time.
Over time.
Yeah. So this whole, like, trip that he's making in this minivan, he's basically, in the book, it's his fault that he loses communication as well. And, like, you know, it's not a storm or anything anymore. Like, he accidentally set something metallic, like touching another metallic object, static electricity built up, and fried Pathfinder.
Oh.
And so it's like, this is a electrical engineering 101, like, you gotta ground yourself. And he didn't do that one step. And what on Earth is a very small, like, minor frustration, he now has no contact with NASA.
Yeah, almost killed him.
Yeah, and he has to, like, be like, okay, well, this was the plan as of, you know, yesterday, and now I'm just going to go forward and do the best I can. And it's not like he's got a great track record of things going according to plan.
So can I ask, the great part of this book / movie is that you're really rooting for Mark the whole time, and, like, you feel like the entire force of humanity behind you, like, everyone is united in this one common cause. If something like this actually happened, how many resources do you think we would actually put towards bringing someone home from a mission like that?
So there is actually an international space agreement that's signed by all spacefaring nations that essentially says that, you know, if someone's in trouble in space, we will help them. Like, you are obligated to help.
Every country.
Wow.
Every single country.
How many countries are in this agreement? Or in space, I guess?
So it used to be a very small number of countries in this agreement. So it was the United States and it was the EU, so all of Europe. But, you know, now England is not part of the EU anymore. Also, China and India are now spacefaring nations. Russia was, you know, one of the first. Russia was first. There's something amongst people who travel into space that connects them all, and they feel very strongly about keeping one of their own safe.
Okay, my most pressing question from the movie. Yeah. I don't know why this is my most pressing question. Does NASA send astronauts to space with branded tumblers that say NASA on them?
Most things say NASA on them. If they can, they do. I cannot speak to what they send to people in space. Normally they go with whatever is lightest and cheapest. Again, as a public entity, NASA cannot compete in any kind of economic free market. So, you know, if NASA develops a rocket booster, so like the external tank, the big red thing that was on the back of the shuttles, as soon as a private company learned how to make those and could supply them with the same rigid safety requirements that NASA did, NASA could no longer legally make those themselves. They had to buy from this company. And that's so that NASA, who is government funded, never has the ability to run away with the free market and, like, corner the market on space travel. Anything that they build is the property of the US people, which is why as soon as they had those plans, they could give them to people and people could start making them themselves.
That's
wow.
fascinating.
NASA is for the people, by the people.
It's so noble.
It's very noble.
Wow.
I know that they also do sort of like citizen science.
Yeah.
So people can actually, like, go onto their website and find initiatives that they are asking for help with. Is that right?
100%.
Yeah.
So actually, the Challenger, which was one of the shuttles that exploded on takeoff, it was actually carrying the first teacher into space, and she's awesome. And they wanted to send a teacher into space specifically so they had someone who knew how to communicate to an audience that wasn't, you know, NASA scientists. You know, it was kind of a PR stunt, but, like, in a very noble way.
Well, and in the end of the movie, you'll have to speak to the end of the book.
I know.
As I haven't read it, does in the movie he's a teacher at the end.
Yes.
He's a professor. He is preparing future astronauts.
Correct. So in the end of the movie, there's a point kind of in the early part of the movie where the first potato sprouts, and he goes over and finds it, and he's like, "Hi," and it's very cute. And then at the end of the movie, he's gotten back, and you know, he's on what is obviously a NASA campus because there's a bunch of, like, astronaut candidates running by him, and they all stop and they go, "Sir," and, you know, kind of bow a little, like they do that awkward, like, "Ha."
So you and Andy Weir, if you'd
I
seen
would
him
have done that exactly. Like, hi. But yeah, so he looks down between his feet, and there's a weed growing in a crack in the sidewalk. It's very Shel Silverstein. And he goes, "Hi." And then the next shot is of him in front of a class, and he does like a very awesome icebreaker where he's like, "Okay, like I'm the guy who like lived in his own feces for a year and a half. I grew potatoes out of them and then ate them." And he goes on with this nice inspirational speech about like, that's the job. Like, you're going to be in danger. You're going to have to figure out a way, and you're just going to start. You're just going to start solving a problem, and that'll lead you either to a new problem or success. And, if success, yay, wait for the next problem. If not success, solve the next problem, and just keep going. That's nice. It's good.
And that's how it ends in the book and the movie?
No.
Okay.
In the book, it ends as soon as he gets onto the Hermes. They take off his helmet and they go, "Woo, you need a bath." And like, that's how it ends.
Yeah.
Oh.
End of book. And I think that's perfect because you know that he's going to go home. You know that it's a happy ending at that point. So I like the ending in the book better than the movie because while it's nice, and it's nice to see him like giving back, unnecessary.
Well, we're going to wrap up, but real quickly, we're going to play a game called What Soul Would You Die On if you were Mark Watney? And I'll go first. I would die literally about 10 minutes after waking up and realizing that I was impaled and having to face the prospect of seeing my own blood while I pulled out an antenna. I can't do it. I get a paper cut and I'm like, nope, somebody else needs to fix this for me. So I'm dead on soul 1.
So, and
6.
to be clear, a soul is like the Martian equivalent of a day. I wouldn't die because I have no business being up there. So, it's a moot point. I wouldn't be up there in the first place. I have no business. Sophie?
I think had I had the same training that Mark Watney had, I think I could have made it through that training, and I think that my hissy fits would have been longer, but I would have made it through. I would have made it to the Iron Man moment and then absolutely let my friends come catch me out in space.
Man, nice. I have no doubt whatsoever. Yes, we're wrapping up. Sophie, I just want to ask you one more question. So, so you did this back in 2014. What do you do now?
I work with your husband at a wonderful research and development company that specializes in drone habitats.
Very cool.
Yep.
Is there anything else you want to tell us?
I could talk about this book for literal hours, literal days even. It's been incredible getting to meet you guys.
Oh,
so that was good.
Thank you.
Well, Sophie, thank you so much. This was fascinating. I could talk about this all day.
Me too.
Well, this has been the podcast, The Book Isn't Necessarily Better, hosted by myself, Roxanne,
Michaela,
and today,
Sophie.
Thanks, and we'll talk to you next time. Sophie and I are a power team at Weekly Trivia. We have been winning. I think we're pretty close to being asked not to come back.
Yeah, I'm at least hoping they let us come back every now and then. Like every third week, take on the champs.
Mm-hmm.
And I did air quotes, and I just realized that you guys can't see those. I'm making a bunch of awkward gestures.
I wouldn't be up there in the first place. I have no business. I'm down here in the library where I should be.
With all your bones pressurized.
With all my books and my bones. Right.